Hello and welcome to Aftersight, everybody. We are sponsored by Audio Information Network of Colorado. I'm your host, Penn Street. As you all know, our mission in creating the Aftersight podcast was really to share stories that show that there is really life after vision loss. Our guest today is the author, Bill Johnson. Bill's story and the choices that he made are in perfect alignment for what our mission here is at Aftersight. Bill's book, Snowblind: Recovering After the Random Shooting, is a memoir of how the violent action of a stranger forever changed Bill's life. Snowblind is available on Audible and through Amazon. You can find out more about Bill and his book and also discover some really amazing resources on Bill's website. And you can find that at authorwilliamjohnson.com. And as usual, those will be in the notes of the podcast if you missed them during the podcast. I accessed Bill's book through Audible on my smart speaker, and I have to tell you, it pulled me in immediately to the point that I only got about 3 hours of sleep that night, and I finished it the very next day. I know our audience will agree that this is an absolute must-read book on so many levels. Bill, welcome to Aftersight.
Thank you very much, Penn, and thank you for those very kind words.
Yeah,
I'm really gratified by the response that I've gotten, and the people that have been able to get a hold of me and tell me that they were inspired by the story that I told.
Yeah.
I was wanted to get my story in writing as much, just I think, for my family and posterity as to be, I guess, presumptuous and imagine that I could really impact people's lives. But that, of course, was one of the goals. And so I've been very gratified and humbled with the reception I've gotten.
Yes. And I mean, that does not surprise me on the least. I get asked to read, listen to a lot of books. And, some of them are you can tell them they're the first time author and, it's a good story, but it's not super well written. While others like yours, it seems like you've been doing this your entire life. Like this is what you do for a living. And I know anybody, and I have talked to some people who have read it, who are the ones that actually introduced me to you, felt the same way. They had nothing but adoration, but also, Bill, one of the things that really struck me with your book is the choices that you made from the moment you woke up. Could you take us back to that day in early July in 1991 and kind of share with us those decisions that you made so quickly?
Sure. It was a day that obviously changed my life. I was 41 years old and I had, had some failures and some successes in life. I was working for a big accounting firm as a management consultant and on a business trip in Atlanta. And on the way to catch a MARTA, the subway there home, for a 4th of July weekend, my boss and I and a client were walking together, and I heard from back behind me, pop, 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 and I didn't know what that was. I really wasn't a gun owner at the, so it turned out a fellow for no reason at all walked up behind and shot the three of us. I had no idea what had happened to me, but I was shot right through the temples and blinded, but still conscious for some period of time before all the way into the hospital. In fact, I didn't know what had happened to, my friend, boss, and a client. And it turns out they were both killed, which is, obviously the real tragedy of what happened that day. But I was also blinded. So,
wow.
I was in the emergency room at Grady Memorial, which was a great trauma center hospital in Atlanta. Very lucky, fortunate for me. Um, and they ended up keeping me sedated and I guess in a semi-induced coma for several days before I woke up.
Wow. And that was
And
also, you were going home. What was it your daughter's birthday? Was that week
yeah,
too?
this happened on the 2nd of July, and my daughter's birthday is the 7th. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So it would have been a weekend with her birthday and some Fourth of July
Yeah.
festivities and such. Yeah.
Yeah. How long did it take you from that moment to when you woke up and you really understood that you were going to be blind for the rest of your life?
Well, that came in stages. I woke up. I think it happened on a Tuesday. I woke up on Thursday. They allowed me to wake up, and I was heavily sedated. And all I could say is that I had a vague recollection of, being on the sidewalk and realizing that I had just an enormous amount of pain in my eyes, and of course, and the sun hurt them, and I was covering my eyes to keep the sunlight coming through my eyelids, as strange as
Wow.
that concept is, from just the pain. So I remembered an event. I didn't really know exactly what it had been. I remembered I couldn't see at that point, but so when I woke up, I was in this kind of druggy haze of
Yeah.
and realized, and I could feel, I felt, the hospital bed, and I became sort of conscious with the environment by feeling it, and didn't really get focused on it. And as I describe in the book, doctors
Yeah.
offered me an explanation and asked me if I wanted to hear what had happened to me, and asked me if I wanted to hear what had happened to my friends. And I think I kind of complain or poke fun at them that for a while I couldn't get anybody to really give me a straight answer.
Yeah.
But I think that they knew better than me, and that they let me, come to an understanding of what the future was going to be for me, kind of on my own terms, at my own speed.
Yeah.
There was a time, about, I guess it was about 10 days to 2 weeks in, when they had kind of weaned me off the drugs. I didn't have any IVs in me anymore.
Right.
And I was, I had been insistent on going home, not knowing what the world was, how I was going to deal with it, or anything else, but
Yeah.
that's what I wanted. And there was an afternoon when it just occurred to me, well, you're going to get what you want. You're going home, and then I thought, but I just really can't open my eyes. This isn't a game. This isn't, a dream. I
Yeah.
really can't open my eyes. I really can't see.
Right. Right.
And, I'm grateful that it happened that quickly, but it was overwhelming. And I don't know really how long I kind of wallowed in that, but for some period of time that afternoon, and I was, overcome. I wanted to scream, wanted to cry, but
Yeah.
I mostly sat there. But
Yeah.
I was, overtaken with a sense that it was going to be okay. And I just, kind of needed to do what I needed to do. But one way or another, life was going to be okay. And an amazing sense of calmness. So,
Mm. So you sort of embraced, like, wow, this is my new life. And I'm glad you
yeah.
mentioned, because I think a lot of times people, when they do get, if they're in an accident or they get the
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis, it does sort of, you know, push. I mean, definitely I've been there more than once, but
Yeah.
that dark place. But you, you kind of allowed yourself to be there for a little bit, but then it's just what is so amazing in your book at not only how you got yourself out of that dark place, but you did it so quickly. 7 months later, you're on skis
Right.
in
Right.
Colorado.
Yeah.
And I know that was in itself, a journey, and somebody who really likes to ski, and tried to get out every weekend during the winter myself, and how important that
Hmm.
is. And it seems like that was something that you focused on to kind of get you through all the training and the, that you had to go through to
Yeah.
get back on those skis.
Yeah. And, and I was in a big hurry. At that point in my life, I was just in a big hurry to I was a recently divorced father of two young kids. I had a job and a career that were just, I think, on the verge of doing very well and getting
Yeah.
a nice promotion. I had friends. I had a pretty nice life, and I didn't know what the world of being a blind person was going to be. I really didn't have any experience, hardly any at all in my whole life with people that were blind, visually impaired. But I knew what I knew about what my life had been the day before this happened, and
Yeah.
I was in a big hurry to get that back.
Get it back.
Amazingly, I had been skiing, and I was not a good skier when I could see, but I had been skiing about 8 or 9 years previous in Aspen, and apparently seeing a blind skier, which didn't really make a conscious impact on me, but I remembered that when I was in the hospital room, and as everyone was wringing their hands over poor Bill, I just
Oh.
it was like, oh, you guys, come on, maybe I'll just go skiing this summer or this winter. How about that? And it did become a goal, and as you well know, I mean, it's been a source of joy in my life ever since. Yeah.
Yeah. And you, I loved in the book where you shared that you researched and different programs that you could go to so you could, you were in a hurry. You wanted to get back to your life before the shooting. And I really appreciated when the program that you ended up going to said you needed to be there a year. And you were like, no, I don't have a year to do that. I could do this quicker. And I feel like everything you did was like that. Like, okay, I do need to do this. I need to do this training, but I'm going to do it on my terms. And that worked so well for you.
Well, and I'm fortunate and I'm grateful that it all did work. I respect, the professionals in the blindness community and the all the people that they deal with. Their theory, and it was state of Missouri who had a contract with Lions World in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Yeah.
School for the Blind. Their experience was that it took people a year to accept their blindness, and I guess to go through the stages of grief, and accept it, and to be, in frank terms, a good investment for the state, because it was, voc rehab for the state of Missouri, and they wanted to spend their money well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew what was in my heart. I knew where my head was. I knew a lot about myself. I didn't know a lot about blindness and the challenges and the frustrations and everything else, but I knew what I needed to do, and I was insistent, and the state of Missouri cooperated. And I met a number of very, very significant, professionals along the way. A woman from St. Louis Society for the Blind, I told her when I was still in a hospital room, that I wanted to go back to work, and she was supportive. She was a really good resource.
Yeah.
I write some about my mobility instructor in Little Rock.
Yeah.
And she was so significant. She was just such a great instructor, such a pleasant, nice person to deal with. But just that skill was just so amazing to me. I went probably 6 weeks, I guess, before anybody put a cane in my hand. And
wow.
So
how did that feel that first time somebody put a cane in your hand?
It just was awesome. I think what I wrote was that it just felt like a tool to me right off the bat. It had a balance, and it just felt right. And that mobility and orientation, really changed my life. So
yeah, and you even didn't seem like it was that. I mean, it was like less than a year, you went and got your first guide dog.
Yeah, they also weren't quite sure they wanted to deal with me after 8 or 9 or 10 months or whatever. And I think it all worked out well. I loved that first guide dog, and I in fact was, with the cooperation of my employer, KPMG. They allowed me, the opportunity to come back to work and offered me different positions, but I wanted to do the same job I had had before, and they agreed. They didn't know if it'd work. I didn't know if it would work. But it did, and they gave me that freedom. They were very supportive. Which is all just a point to say that, my job involved traveling all around the country with doing work with clients. And my friend Darby, my seeing eye dog, and I, we saw the country, and it was a blast.
Oh, did Darby have his own, or was it a girl or boy? I can't remember.
He was a boy.
A boy.
Yeah.
Did Darby have his own frequent flyer miles?
I used to laugh about that. I really never, I never really set up the account, but I used to laugh about that. We would have a taxi cab. So I'd take a cab from my home to the airport a lot.
Yeah.
And I became familiar enough with the routine. I told a cab driver one day, just drop me off at, exit number 1, and I'll find my way in, we'll find our way into the ticket counter. And he I could hear him kind of wonder and pause. And all of a sudden he says, how'd that dog learn how to read? Like TWA. But I was like, oh boy, I better get out of here. But anyway, yeah, I could go through that door, and Darby knew his way right up to the TWA ticket counter, and they would, greet us by name from whoever. It was great.
Did you, when you were in Little Rock, what are some of the adaptive technology things that you used to be able to go back to work?
Well, the magical thing, and keep in mind, this is 1991.
Right.
It was a computer with a voice card in it, and a program I don't even remember the name of at this point in time. This was right on the edge of Windows becoming the thing. So my first computer was a DOS computer, and it changed my world. My biggest frustration immediately upon coming home by myself to live in my house was I didn't have access to any data, like even just simple stuff, telephone numbers.
Right.
I couldn't record thoughts. I didn't have any way to do all the stuff that, people don't give it any consideration until, I didn't until I was in the situation. So my DOS computer was, my biggest tool for, 3, 4, 5 years before, Windows adaptations got better and my work started really to implement. A lot of the world started to revolve around email sometime in the mid 90s. And
now all of that fits into our smartphone,
Yeah. Who would know this thing with no buttons would be so amazingly adaptive?
I know. So Bill, you still come out to Colorado and ski with Foresight ski guides out of Vail. I think
I do.
How often do you get to come out and ski?
Well, for many years I was going 3 weeks a year. I'd say for the last 8 to 10 years, I'd go for a couple weeks a year. Sharing time between usually Foresight ski guides in Vail, and I go up to Steamboat. There's a program up there named Stars.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that is one thing that we are so fortunate in Colorado to have so many adaptive not just ski programs, but throughout the year that we have some really awesome adaptive recreation contacts out here. So Bill, also one of the things that struck me too in your book is that you really didn't hold a grudge, or it didn't seem like anger towards the person who shot you. That's remarkable. How did you how did you get to that point, or was it just not even on your radar to do that?
I'll say again, I just think I'm very fortunate that with what happened and the result being blindness. And the event could have been so much different, and I could have had much more damage, much more scarring emotionally, and physically or whatever.
Yeah.
This fellow, he approached us from the back, from the rear. So I never had the feeling of being assaulted and threatened. It was just bang. What happened? I'm on the sidewalk. I can't see. There's pain, and I really never personalized it. He was caught and disarmed right on the scene, and he's in jail now. And I just maybe something subconscious just tells me I just don't want to go there, and I don't want to get hung up on that. And it wasn't anything any of us had done to arouse his attention or to upset him. So it was a totally impersonal act from a guy who's obviously got some issues. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even the title of your book, it was random. It wasn't personal to you. So, but again, I just think that's remarkable, because a lot of people put that kind of darkness towards that person and really wallowed in that for a long time, maybe even forever. So I think that's really, really cool. So Bill, what would you like to tell the audience about sort of the magic that makes Bill Bill?
Oh boy. I think my message just overall is that, I was just kind of a regular guy. I was nothing special. When all this happened, I had some failures, some successes. And I think, if anything, I just didn't place any limits on what I was going to be able to do and what my life was going to be like as a blind person, or, anybody that might listen to this that has, any kind of challenge in their life. We all have had challenges of other, many sorts and types. And, this one was pretty dramatic and a pretty exceptional event in anyone's life. But when we're dealing with challenges, they're always big to all of us as we're in the middle of them. I think that, so what I did, and, looking back and reflecting on it, was I did have goals and I did have dreams. I pictured, going back to that life that I'd had before, and that's what I worked towards. I also, I did the work. I did my part of it, and I dug in, and I worked. I was pretty persistent there for 8 or 9 or 10 months until I found myself, sitting back in my office and with my telephone, and it rang, and it was an ex-client, and it was, and I'm thinking, wow, I've come a long way. But so as I say, dreaming, having goals, maybe at a little more immediate level than a dream.
Yeah.
And then going to work, and staying positive. And I will say one more thing, that that I ran into a few people, as I describe in the book, who were pretty negative.
Yeah.
About the future for blind people, and I certainly don't minimize the employment challenges within the blindness community. It's a huge challenge.
Right. Yeah.
But I just didn't listen to them. At some point I decided I was just going to be the most, functional, unobtrusive, I guess, productive blind person that I could be. And kind of like, the heck with everybody. If that's not good enough, I'm going to find out. But I think it was. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying, you put in the work, because you really did, and I don't think anybody would walk away from your book thinking differently, but because it really did come across to me, the amount of effort and tenacity that you showed
Yeah.
during those first few months is incredible. And it really did build the foundation for, you going back to work and having those tools. I have a saying that I've shared before, and it came from a woman I met a long time ago. And she said, it's show up, work hard, and don't fall in love with the outcome. And the reason you don't fall in love with the outcome is because if you tie, like if the outcome, as even going down a ski slope, yes, you can picture yourself in your head going down, but you don't know what's going to happen along the way.
Right.
But I do believe that, if you do show up and you work hard, that outcome is going to be fulfilled, fulfilling to you and your life. And you definitely are proof of that. And
yeah, I would just add to that, that if you do whatever your challenge is, if you give it your best and you work your hardest and, really put yourself into addressing the challenge, everything doesn't, like you're saying, everything doesn't work out the way you want it to, but you at least know you did your part. You don't have to second guess, if I'd have just tried harder, or if I'd have done this or that, but then my life would be different. I know I did, and we can all know that we did what we needed to do.
Yeah.
And
yeah. That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, Bill, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story. And I hope to see you out on the slopes this winter.
That would be wonderful. Thanks very much for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Penn.